to stand out in the competitive crowd. So this is something that we'll discuss in the following videos. The next big topic is going to be standardized testing, a major trend shift. One of the most notable recent trends is the reversal of test optional policies at elite schools. So, for instance, Harvard. After 4 years of test optional admissions, Harvard announced in April of 2024 that it will require ACT and SAT scores for applicants to the class of 2029 and beyond. The Faculty of Arts and Sciences cited new research showing that test scores help identify high achievers from under-resourced schools. In other words, students that come from disadvantaged backgrounds now can show their academic merit through something like the SAT. So therefore, it is useful in identifying those students. In other words, students that have the talent but otherwise would not be able to afford or at least demonstrate their academic merit so readily. For Stanford, for fall of 2026 admissions, Stanford reinstituted a testing requirement after a faculty recommendation and governance vote. The decision came as Stanford noticed its entering class had an average of 3.94 GPA and a 1540 SAT for students that submitted their scores, and sought more data for evaluating applicants. For Princeton, starting with the 2027-2028 cycle, the class of 2032, Princeton will once again require SAT and ACT scores. Inside Higher Education reported that this is what makes Princeton the 7th Ivy League, returning to mandatory testing. Columbia remains the lone Ivy still test optional. Princeton cited 5 years of test optional data showing students with scores tended to perform better academically. So they're going beyond saying that people that did submit scores and had competitive scores tended to do better overall in terms of their 4 years at Princeton. For Brown, similarly, Brown's president announced reinstating test requirements for the class of 2029. Brown had paused tests in 2020, but decided the data showed SAT and ACT scores help with equitable access and academic matching. For Dartmouth, in February of 2024, Dartmouth's admissions office officially stated it will require tests for class of 2029 applicants. Dartmouth's announcement emphasized research showing test scores combined with GPA are strong predictors of college success and help identify talent across diverse backgrounds, which is something that we talked about just now. And then as for other Ivies, Yale and Cornell had already reinstated testing. Columbia and Penn remain test optional for now. Outside the Ivy League, many selective privates, for example, Caltech, also went back to requiring scores. So what does this mean for applicants? Even if a school is nominally test optional, a strong SAT/ACT score can still boost an application. So what we say at WinMay is we recommend students to go through admissions testing. And the idea is we tell students to include their scores if they have competitive scores. If not, to consider applying test optional. However, as you see, there is a growing trend for SAT scores and ACT scores going back to being required. So most students will probably have to go through that testing experience. For 2026 to 2027 admissions, applicants to top colleges should treat test prep as a priority. So that's what I was just saying. Weak scores can be omitted, but above average scores relative to a college's typical profile can only help. So that is what we base our advice on at WinMay. At the very least, plan to take the SAT/ACT again if your earlier scores were modest, since many peers will have enhanced their applications with tests. The era of ignoring standardized testing at lead schools is largely over, unfortunately. Academic rigor and curriculum. Top colleges are demanding strong academic preparation more than ever, maxing out rigor with balance. Colleges judge GPA in context. This is really important. Two students with 4.0 GPAs might be very different. One took easy courses, one took the hardest possible schedule. Admissions committees increasingly look for applicants who took the most challenging classes their school offered. For instance, AP, IB, honors, dual enrollment, etc., and succeeded. An applicant with a mere 3.9 GPA but all honors classes may be viewed more favorably than a 4.0 in a lightweight curriculum. So the rigor is definitely something that's really, really important. Subject depth, particularly for STEM majors, courses like multivariable calculus, physics C, or upper division sciences signal readiness. For humanities, 2 years of foreign language and APs like English literature or history are expected. Taking just one AP or neglecting core subjects can stand out negatively in a pool where 90% of applicants will have many APs and IBs. I myself finished with 17 AP courses. Granted, 4 of those were half credit courses. However, it's just an indication of the importance of taking APs and also making sure that you space out the APs, especially the hardest ones. You don't want to be taking all the hardest ones together. And lastly, grade inflation awareness. Colleges know that grading standards vary by school. If everyone is near the top, admissions officers look for differences like A minus versus A, or note students' improvement trajectory. They also value additional evidence of achievement, awards, competitions, research, when grades alone may not distinguish applicants. So previously, before they were discontinued, the College Board used to have SAT 2's subject tests. So you could take an SAT based on a specific subject, for instance, biology, physics, chemistry, etc. They did that because they needed more data to compare students by. But that's been, that's over and done with. But the principle still remains. When things get really competitive, you need more information, more data to be able to distinguish between two students. In the end, academics remains king in admissions. With so many qualified applicants, a polished academic record is the foundation. We always say that colleges will start by looking at your grades first at WinMay because you're a student first. But colleges also know straight A's in all easy classes looks less impressive if peers are taking rigorous courses. So context is everything. The common tip from admissions deans is take the hardest schedule you can handle well. It shows willingness to challenge oneself. So looking back in my experience, I tried to maximize the number of APs that I took, mostly to challenge myself. I didn't necessarily do it for colleges. So I took everything from the STEM APs to taking, for instance, like AP French.